Sir, stand up. We need you to step outside.
What's going on? I'm here for my
Don't
daughter.
touch me.
Don't touch me!
Touch me on it.
I'm not resisting. I'm just here for my kid.
Right.
Why are you doing this?
The gym was packed. Parents, siblings, and friends sat shoulder to shoulder, eyes fixed on the stage where tiny dancers twirled and sang. Then suddenly, it all erupted into chaos. Police officers stormed the room. Shouts filled the air. One father, a tall man with a calm and fierce look named Elijah Grant, was yanked from his seat in front of everyone. Hands cuffed behind his back, he shouted, "I didn't do anything." But no one listened. Mothers gasped. Children cried. Some fathers stared in disbelief, anger boiling behind their eyes. The entire school performance, meant to celebrate children, had turned into a nightmare in seconds. Before we go further, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And if you like stories that uncover the truth and don't hold back, hit that subscribe button. We've got a lot to unpack, and this story is far from over. Elijah had driven an hour to see his daughter Lila perform. She was only 8 years old, standing nervously on stage, trying to remember her lines. He had promised he'd be in the front row, right in front of the stage, and now he was being arrested as his little girl watched. Some people yelled at the officers, "Why are you doing this in front of kids?" Others whispered, shaking their heads in disbelief. The police, led by Chief Leonard Matthews, moved quickly, ignoring the crowd's protests. "Step aside, sir," one officer barked as Elijah stood his ground. "I'm not stepping aside. I'm my daughter's father," he shot back. The tension in the room was thick. Racial undertones hung in the air. Whispers, sideways glances, and some of the parents yelling at officers made it clear the community had been waiting for moments like this. It wasn't just about the arrest. It was about the bigger picture. Outside, news crews had already begun filming. Phones were lifted high above heads, capturing every second. The video would go viral within hours, the kind of viral clip that sparks outrage across the nation. The school principal, Karen Fields, tried to calm the parents but had little control. "Please, everyone, stay calm," she said, her voice trembling. But calm was impossible. People were furious. Inside the police van, Elijah kept repeating, "You don't understand. I'm here for my daughter." Officers ignored him. Meanwhile, Lela was backstage, confused and scared. She tugged at her teacher's sleeve. "Where's Daddy?" she asked, tears forming. Teachers tried to explain without breaking the child's heart, but the sight of her father being arrested had already scared her young mind. The story didn't just stay in the school. By the next morning, a lawyer named Harold Jennings filed a $32.1 billion claim against the police department for wrongful arrest, emotional distress, and public humiliation. He said, "This is more than just an arrest. This is about how black fathers are treated in public spaces, even when they're doing nothing wrong." Social media exploded. People debated, shared, and argued. Some defended the officers. Others called it a clear case of racial profiling. Elijah's arrest wasn't random. Weeks earlier, the neighborhood had seen an uptick in complaints from nearby stores. Police had responded aggressively in previous incidents. Community members argued that the department had been looking for a reason to exert power over black fathers like Elijah. His calm demeanor and willingness to comply only made the arrest feel unnecessary, even cruel. The footage showed something that would haunt viewers. Elijah standing tall, hands raised slightly in surrender, surrounded by officers. Behind him, children were crying, and parents were shouting. Some officers had their hands on weapons, while others tried to restrain him. The contrast was stark. On one side, a father there to support his daughter. On the other, a team ready to treat him like a threat. The racial tension was undeniable. Meanwhile, Chief Leonard Matthews held a press conference. His words were precise, carefully chosen, but critics called them defensive. "Our officers acted based on protocols and prior information," Matthews said. He refused to go into details about the alleged reason for the arrest. The public, however, wanted transparency. They wanted to know why a loving father at a school performance was being treated like a criminal. Harold Jennings, Elijah's lawyer, was relentless. "We are seeking justice not just for Elijah, but for his daughter, for every child who has to witness their parent humiliated in public. The city must answer for this," he said. His statement sent shockwaves through the community and stirred debates on every major news outlet. Social media was relentless. Twitter threads exploded with clips of the arrest. Some users called it another black father punished for simply being present. Others debated, questioning if the father had provoked the officers. The conversation was heated, polarized, and intense. But the undeniable fact remained. Elijah had come to support his child, and he ended up in handcuffs in front of dozens of children. Even after being released, Elijah faced public scrutiny. He received calls from local organizations offering support. Advocates for parental rights, civil rights groups, and other community leaders rallied. He became a symbol, not just of an individual wrong, but of a broader societal issue. The story wasn't just about him. It was about how the system often fails Black fathers, even in safe spaces like schools. At the heart of the matter was Lila. Her performance, which was meant to be a shining moment, had turned into trauma. Family and friends worked to comfort her. Psychologists stepped in to explain what happened in terms a child could understand, but the damage was visible in her hesitant smile and the way she clung to her mother afterward. This arrest became a defining moment for the town, the school, and the family. Conversations began in living rooms, community centers, and city halls. Parents demanded change. Advocates demanded accountability. And journalists dug deeper, uncovering past incidents, patterns, and complaints that painted a picture of a department struggling with racial bias and public trust. Elijah, though shaken, vowed to fight. He worked with his lawyer, community leaders, and media contacts to ensure his story stayed visible. The claim for $32.1 million wasn't just about money. It was about justice, visibility, and preventing another family from experiencing the same humiliation. By the end, it was clear. This wasn't just a local incident. It was a national conversation waiting to explode. One father, arrested at his daughter's school, had become a symbol of frustration, injustice, and the struggle Black fathers face every day. And yet, the story had only just begun. The day after the arrest, the streets outside the school were alive with anger and confusion. Parents, neighbors, and activists gathered, holding signs that read, "Justice for Elijah," and "Black fathers deserve respect." Cars honked, people shouted, and the tension was palpable. Elijah, but still processing the shock, had become the center of a storm he never asked for. Every camera that turned his way seemed to ask one question: why? Inside the city's police department, officers whispered among themselves. Some were defensive, saying they had done their job. Others were uneasy, knowing the arrest was going to draw national attention. Chief Leonard Matthews walked through the hallways with a forced calm, but even he could feel the weight of public scrutiny pressing down. The pressure wasn't just local, it was everywhere. News outlets, talk shows, and social media were blasting every frame of Elijah's arrest. Meanwhile, Elijah's lawyer, Harold Jennings, dug into every detail. He interviewed witnesses, examined police reports, and reviewed security footage. He uncovered something disturbing. The arresting officer, Sergeant Daniel Ortiz, had a history of complaints about racial bias in previous incidents. Harold said, "This isn't just about one father at a school event. This is not a pattern. An officer using unnecessary force on Black men." His words spread across news platforms like wildfire, igniting outrage across the city and the country. Elijah spent the morning recounting every moment of the arrest. "They treated me like I was dangerous, but I was just there to see my daughter," he said in a televised interview. His voice trembled with anger and disbelief. Behind him, Lila clung to her mother, her small face peeking out from behind the camera. The image of a little girl witnessing her father taken in handcuffs shocked viewers and sparked nationwide debate. Community leaders began organizing meetings to demand accountability. Pastor Raymond Hill, a respected voice in the neighborhood, spoke to a crowd of hundreds outside City Hall. How many more fathers have to be humiliated before the system changes? How many more children have to cry because they saw their parent treated like a criminal? His words stirred the crowd. Some cheered, some wept. But everyone understood that this arrest was bigger than Elijah. It was a symbol of a larger injustice. The school principal, Karen Fields, faced mounting pressure. Teachers and parents criticized her for not preventing the chaos, though she insisted she had no authority to stop police action. In an interview, she said, "I never imagined a school performance could turn into an arrest. I've worked here 20 years, and nothing like this has ever happened." But critics weren't satisfied. Many argued that schools should have clear protocols for police presence to protect children and families. Back at home, Elijah tried to process everything. His phone buzzed nonstop. Calls from media, community members, and even strangers offering support. Every notification felt like a reminder of what had happened. Yet he knew he had to stay strong for Lila. His lawyer encouraged him to keep speaking out, but each interview left him emotionally drained. I just want my daughter to feel safe again, he admitted to Harold. I didn't ask for this fight, but now it's ours to win. Then came a shocking twist. Security footage from a nearby store surfaced, showing Elijah walking calmly toward the school, with no sign of aggression. Yet police reports claimed he had acted threateningly, giving the department a reason for the arrest. The footage directly contradicted their statements. Harold Jennings released it to the press, and outrage grew. Social media erupted with anger, accusations, and hashtags calling for Sergeant Ortiz to be investigated. Tensions escalated during a city council meeting. Parents, activists, and journalists packed the chambers. Elijah sat quietly in the front row, while Chief Matthews and Sergeant Ortiz faced questions. One mother yelled, "Why is my child not safe in their own school?" Another father shouted, "How dare you treat a loving father like a criminal?" The room shook with emotion, a mix of fear, anger, and disbelief. Outside the city council, protests began to form. Hundreds of people marched, chanting Elijah's name. Cars slowed to honk in solidarity. Local news helicopters hovered, broadcasting live footage. Some protesters held signs specifically calling out Sergeant Ortiz. "No more racial profiling," and "Protect our fathers" filled the streets. The tension between the community and police department was palpable, and everyone knew this was only the beginning. Amid all this, Lila tried to understand what had happened. She asked her mother, "Why did they take Daddy?" Her mother struggled to explain, carefully choosing her words. "Some people are scared of things they don't understand," she said softly. "But Daddy was just being a dad, and we will make sure everyone knows that." Even though her mother tried to protect her, Layla's eyes reflected confusion and hurt that no words could fix. Legal battles were heating up. Harold Jennings filed multiple motions to access police communications from the day of the arrest. He suspected there had been miscommunication, or worse, intentional targeting. Every revelation seemed to worsen the police department's image. Community activists said, "This isn't just a mistake, it's systemic, and we won't stop until we see real change." Then came an unexpected development. Sergeant Ortiz gave an off-the-record interview to a local reporter. He defended his actions but admitted it's possible that emotions escalated faster than intended. It was a high-pressure situation. His words, however, were met with skepticism. Critics argued that high pressure cannot justify humiliating a father in front of children. The city was now divided. Some defended the police, some condemned them, and everyone else watched with disbelief. Elijah had become more than a man arrested at his daughter's school. He was now a figure in a movement demanding justice for black fathers everywhere. The city was alive with protests, meetings, and debates. Social media was flooded with clips, opinions, and outrage. And behind it all, Lala's performance, the reason he came to the school, remained overshadowed by trauma and a fight that was far from over. The courtroom was packed. Cameras, journalists, and community members filled every seat. Elijah sat at the front, flanked by his lawyer, Harold Jennings, his hands folded tightly, eyes fixed on the judge. Across the room, Chief Leonard Matthews and Sergeant Daniel Ortiz sat stiffly, their expressions unreadable. The tension in the air was almost unbearable. Every person in the room knew this case wasn't just about one father. It was about a system, about racial injustice, and about children witnessing authority misuse its power. Before we dive deeper, I want to ask, where are you watching from right now? Let me know in the comments, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this unbelievable story. The hearing opened with the city's lawyer defending the police. "Our officers acted according to protocol," he said, voice steady, almost rehearsed. It was a concern for public safety, and Mr. Grant's behavior was interpreted as non-compliant. Murmurs ran through the courtroom. People shook their heads. It was clear to most that the footage, already circulating online, told a very different story. Elijah had done nothing threatening. Harold Jennings stood and approached the bench. "Your Honor, the evidence clearly shows Mr. Grant was handcuffed in front of children for no lawful reason," he said. His voice was calm but sharp, cutting through the tension like a knife. "This isn't just about protocol. This is about racial profiling, public humiliation, and emotional trauma to a minor who witnessed her father being treated like a criminal." He turned to the judge, making eye contact. "We are seeking $32.1 million for damages. This is not negotiable." The judge nodded but remained neutral. Cameras clicked, reporters scribbled notes, and the courtroom was silent for a heartbeat before chaos erupted outside. A protest had begun spontaneously outside the courthouse. Hundreds of people chanted Elijah's name, waving signs demanding justice. The sound of their voices filtered in, shaking the walls of the courtroom. The judge banged her gavel, trying to maintain order, but the tension was impossible to contain. Then something shocking happened. Sergeant Ortiz was called to testify. He stood, hands slightly trembling, and began recounting the arrest. "I believe Mr. Grant's posture and movement were threatening," he said, eyes flicking toward Elijah. "We had to act immediately." A hush fell. Harold Jennings didn't flinch. "Threatening? Mr. Ortiz, do you see the footage that clearly shows him walking calmly toward the stage?" Ortiz hesitated. "Yes, but the situation escalated quickly." The courtroom erupted in whispers and gasps. Parents who had once trusted the system now openly questioned it. One woman whispered to her neighbor, "How can a calm father be called threatening in front of children? It's unbelievable." Another man shook his head, muttering, "This is exactly why people fear the police in our neighborhoods." The racial tension that had been simmering since the arrest now boiled openly in the room. Outside, protests intensified. News crews broadcast live footage of the crowd growing larger, chanting slogans and waving signs. Elijah's supporters held up pictures of Lila performing, juxtaposed with the viral footage of his arrest. Social media users across the country shared the clips, sparking debates, heated arguments, and calls for accountability. The story had gone national. Back in the courtroom, Harold introduced new evidence: communications between officers prior to the arrest. Texts revealed a troubling pattern. One officer wrote, "Keep an eye on him, he's probably trouble." Another said, "Make sure he doesn't cause problems." The room went silent. Chief Matthews shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The implications were clear. The arrest was planned, or at least biased, not a spontaneous act of public safety. Lila's teacher, Maria Lopez, was called to testify. She described the chaos of the day and how terrified the children were. The students saw their father taken in handcuffs. Some cried, some froze. "It was traumatic," she said. Her voice shook, but she continued. Elijah Grant did nothing threatening. He was calm. He was simply attending his daughter's performance. The judge took notes, the jury exchanged glances, and the courtroom atmosphere became heavier with each word. Then came the most shocking testimony. A parent, Jared Mills, who had been sitting 2 rows behind Elijah, recounted his view. "I've seen police in schools before," he said, "but I've never seen anything like this. It wasn't about safety. It was about sending a message. And that message was loud and clear to everyone in that room. Black fathers are treated differently." His words reverberated across the courtroom. Murmurs of agreement erupted. The racial undertones that had been present since the arrest were now undeniable in the legal proceedings. Elijah's own testimony was next. He stood, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "I came to watch my daughter perform," he said. "I followed every instruction. I posed no threat. Yet I was handcuffed in front of children who looked up to me. My daughter is scared. She doesn't understand why her father was treated like this. I am fighting for her, for all children who should never have to witness this." His words hung in the air, the weight of truth undeniable. Outside, protesters clashed with police barriers, demanding accountability. Social media campaigns accelerated. The hashtag Justice for Elijah trended nationally. Public figures weighed in, with some defending the police and others condemning the actions. The pressure on Chief Matthews was relentless, and the city's reputation was a freefall. The chapter ended with a bombshell revelation. Evidence surfaced showing a previous pattern of racial bias complaints in the department, complaints that had been dismissed or ignored. The revelation sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Legal analysts speculated that this case could expose systemic racial issues, not just in the city but across similar departments nationwide. It was clear the courtroom was more than a legal battle. It was a battlefield for truth, justice, and racial equality. Elijah's fight had become symbolic, and every testimony, every protest, and every viral video pushed the story closer to a national reckoning. The day of the verdict arrived, and the tension outside the courthouse was electric. Hundreds of people crowded the steps, waving signs and chanting Elijah Grant's name. News vans lined the streets, cameras rolling, broadcasting lived to millions. Elijah sat inside, flanked by Harold Jennings, his heart pounding with every passing second. Lila clutched her mother's hand tightly, her small body tense with anticipation. This was the moment that could change everything. "Before we go any further, tell me, where are you watching from right now? And if you haven't already, subscribe to follow this unbelievable story to the very end." Inside the courtroom, the The judge entered and everyone rose. The jury filed in, their faces serious, the weight of responsibility clear. The air was heavy. Chief Leonard Matthews and Sergeant Daniel Ortiz sat silently, their expressions unreadable. Outside, the protest continued, voices loud enough to echo inside the walls. It was as if the city itself was holding its breath. The foreperson of the jury stood. "We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff, Elijah Grant," they said, voice steady. Gasps and cheers erupted in the courtroom. Elijah's eyes filled with tears. He had been vindicated, but more than that, his fight had exposed the truth. The court ruled that his arrest was unlawful, that it caused emotional trauma to both him and his daughter, and that the police department had acted with bias. The $32.1 million claim was approved in principle, though city lawyers immediately said it would be negotiated. To Elijah and his supporters, the number was less important than the principle. He had been publicly humiliated. A young girl had witnessed her father being treated like a criminal, and now the system had acknowledged the injustice. Chief Matthews faced immediate backlash. The ruling made national headlines. Commentators called for resignations, reforms, and transparency. Sergeant Ortiz was suspended pending further investigation. The city's reputation took a massive hit. Community leaders, activists, and parents demanded policy changes to prevent another incident like this. "This can't happen again," Pastor Raymond Hill said outside the courthouse. "No father, no mother, and no child should ever face this kind of humiliation." The courtroom cameras captured Elijah hugging his daughter for the first time in weeks. Lila's tears of fear turned into tears of relief. "Daddy," she whispered. "It's okay, baby girl." "We won," he said, holding her close. The crowd outside, watching through live streams, erupted into applause. It was a small moment of victory in a long, painful story. But the aftermath wasn't simple. The police department faced multiple lawsuits, community protests continued, and city officials scrambled to restore trust. Social media buzzed endlessly with clips of the arrest, the courtroom drama, and the victory hug between father and daughter. Analysts debated whether this case would spark national reform, and many said it would become a reference point for future discussions on racial profiling and parental rights. Elijah and Harold Jennings immediately began working with community organizations to push for systemic change. They met with local lawmakers to draft new policies for police conduct in schools, focusing on protecting children and families from unnecessary arrests. Elijah said, "I didn't want to be a symbol, but I will use this moment to fight for every parent who has ever been treated unfairly." Meanwhile, Lila started attending therapy sessions to process the trauma of witnessing her father's arrest. Teachers and school staff worked closely with parents to ensure children felt safe and understood the events without being overwhelmed. Slowly, she began to smile again, though the memory of that day would stay with her. Even months later, the story continued to make waves. Documentaries, podcasts, and news segments explored the details of the arrest, the courtroom battle, and the national conversation it ignited. Every new discussion reinforced the larger truth. Elijah's arrest was not an isolated incident, but part of a pattern of systemic bias that needed urgent attention. Some people still defending the police argued it was a single mistake, a misunderstood situation. But the overwhelming consensus was different. Parents, children, civil rights groups, and ordinary citizens saw the story for what it truly was, an example of what can happen when authority is exercised without accountability, when racial bias influences decisions, and when the voices of Black fathers are ignored. By the end of the year, Elijah had become a public figure for justice and parental rights. He spoke at rallies, gave interviews, and worked with organizations advocating for reform in schools and police departments nationwide. Lila, proud of her father but still young, watched quietly, learning the power of standing up for what is right. The city finally implemented reforms: clearer protocols for police and schools, mandatory sensitivity and bias training for officers, and public reporting for any incidents involving parents or children. While not perfect, it was progress.